saying thank you for attending the webinar today. We have some good information, and we wish to share with you from our vendor partner, Kalelus of Infinite Electronics. So we've given it a little bit of time, so we're trying to make sure that we capture everybody, but we're going to get started on time. As far as housekeeping goes, especially those that may be calling from a business location, if you put us on hold because you have to take care of something, please don't just drop off and then call back into it if you can, especially if you have like hold music or something like that that's going to basically interfere with the rest of us, and we might have to find a way to drop you off if that's the case. Logistically, I wanted to cover a couple more things. So please mute your phones, especially if you're in a noisy environment. But I would also mute everybody anyway, but just as a courtesy, please mute your phones, especially if you're like in a car or something like that. We will be recording this session for training purposes. And finally, on questions, as Kevin indicated earlier, please use the chat box. And we'll cover as many of these throughout the course of the presentation and at the end. Other than that, let me turn this over to the man with all the information and the Verizon National Sales Manager for Kalelus, Mr. Kevin Turner, and the show is yours, sir. You let me know as the slides need to go through.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Reese. I appreciate it. And feel free to move on to the next slide with your face in mind.
All right.
And then again to the next slide. So I think I mentioned this. There's actually 17 slides, including 3 of which are the 2 titles and the final. There's a lot of content, but we'll get through pretty quickly. What I wanted to cover is first of all, I don't have this as a page, but Infinite Electronics, for those who don't know, is a holding company. They own Kalelus, they own Polyphaser, Transtector, Radio Waves, among 6 other brands. The brands we're going to talk about are predominantly Kalelus, a little Polyphaser, and a little Transtector today. And the main purpose of this is to introduce some filters that are available and some that are pending, but kind of some trends that we've seen and why we've done this new filter development. So, you know, what's causing that? FirstNet, 4-branch diversity, which some people might call 4x4 MIMO, 4T4R. Also, the introduction of the 4310 as a go-to connector for many of the carriers. We've also seen some very specific frequency demands where we have same band combining. I've got a few slides on that. You might call it in-band combining, same band combining, zero guard band combining, especially on 850. We're going to talk very briefly about power safety for small cell sites. We've seen some astronomical figures in 2019 as to development into small cell, AT&T, Verizon, as well as Crown Castle and others. So it's definitely an area that we're focusing at Kalelus. We're also on the polyphaser front with the implementation of 4310 connectors, where we have some new surge protection I'll talk about very briefly. And then some of you only know Kalelus for test and measurement. We are actually, Sumitech is the first test and measurement company to have PIM test and measurement. That's Kalelus, that's where we started. I'll talk about some trends in test and measurement and some new product development there. Feel free to move on, please. So I mentioned the 4310 connector. It's not just in the new band 14 radios, but also in the new dual band radios and other radios and even antennas. That connector design is designed to be smaller. It's not the mini DIN, that's the 4195. This is a new connector design, but it's, you know, while we're designing everything to be smaller, why not stop at the connector? We basically are designing now filters that are small cell filters, but can be used on macro sites. So the 4310 connector now is part of our new filter design, part of our new test and measurement design, part of our new RF surge protection design. Additionally, with some of the carriers, we're seeing some trends where the radio is moving to the top of the towers. So instead of having everything at the bottom and then combining everything and moving up to the top, you're seeing new dual band radios that are at least on order, if not on their way. The new combiners, the new filters, as well as the antennas are now going up to the top. So there's a demand to decrease the size and weight and the wind load of those products. Additionally, we're seeing some new frequencies for 4G and 5G. So CBRS, which is your 3.5, LAA, which is your 5 gig, and then even what's called NR, your 28 and 39 gig. We're seeing a lot of new development there as well. And then finally, on the small cell front, there's a new demarcation cabinet with or without surge protection. I'll talk about some UL67 ratings. Yes, I just had an audio issue. Hang on just a second, please.
Now, I'm not sure if he wanted me to move to the next slide, so hopefully we'll get back on track, but I think he covered that last bullet as well. Now, also...
Yeah, sorry about that, Reese. I'm back. Just had an audio issue.
Right. That's okay. And so, Kevin, were you done with that last slide, sir?
I was, yes.
Okay. And so remember, folks, as we're watching or listening to Kevin go through these acronyms and such, if they're unfamiliar to you, please type those things in there, and we'll touch base on any of those, because we're not trying to talk over anybody's head, but we are making a bit of an assumption based off of your registration that you're pretty familiar with the information. So again, if there's anything and you don't want to speak up, or you can't speak up now anyway, please type it into the chat box. Okay?
Thanks,
Go
Reese.
ahead, Kevin.
So just as an example of kind of a trend in getting things smaller, our new high combiner, our DBC51, used to be about 7.5 pounds for a single. Then we came out with a new one that's half the size, actually less than half the size for a single. And finally, we're at the point where we actually have a quad high combiner that's less than the size of the old single. So just as far as the trend, we're obviously really focusing on driving down the size. Next slide, please. So one of our highest runners is the low combiner. So this is our DBC61. Our numbers are sequential. We don't have the best part numbering. We know that. We're working on that. But we've actually taken our highest running product, and this is actually anything that has a 700 port on it, we've taken and we're redesigning it. So what are we doing? We're taking the 700 port, we're adding 600 to the port. We're taking the 7/16 DIN connectors. They now have 4310 versions. Everything, we used to have this thing called a DC switch. This switch was basically a DC block. You put it in place, and then you could basically change where the AISG path is. We actually now do everything auto-sense. So these new products are 33% less reduction in weight, and a twin uses a single housing. So I'll show you what that means in the next slide. So as you can see on the frequency bands, the 600 is now on the 700 port. We've gone from about 9.5 pounds to about 6.5 pounds. The RF power is less, has 4310 connectors, and then there's auto sense capabilities on the products. So these are now available in single, twin, and in quad configurations. And actually, if you go to the next slide, I'll show you all the families of product. So this is a lot of information. I'm not going to go through it. Believe it, don't worry. But so the low combiners, high combiners are available now, ready to ship. We have new products coming out: a low high, a low high, and even a quad, which is a low high combiner that will be ready to go in about 2 months. So I have all the specs built here. Feel free to contact your local Talley salesperson if you want any information on these products. We can do spec sheets. But especially for AT&T and Verizon, the high and the low are ready to go right now. Next one, please. So one of the interesting areas that we've done a lot of development is we actually started doing PCS in-band combiners about 3 years ago for the PCS frequencies for Verizon. And those products were done with ceramic resonators, which doesn't really matter other than the fact that ceramics are about double the size and double the cost of metallic. So what we've done is some very innovative engineering where we've been able to use metallic resonators. And in the case of AT&T and Verizon, AT&T still has on 850 UMTS spectrum. Verizon has CDMA spectrum on 850. What we've done is we've come up with some innovative products which allow you to use a passive device that has a kind of a lower cost solution using metallic versus ceramic, and combine your LTE with your CDMA or with your UMTS. So if you go to the next slide, I'll show you some examples of that. With AT&T, just keep in mind these products with AT&T are approved by exception, so they are approved, but you're not going to have a CEQ number. If you have your UMTS on these various frequencies, or in different ones, we can do new product development. The alternative to combining UMTS and LTE on the same feeder line are usually active devices that are, yes, they're field selectable, field switchable, but at the same time, they're very expensive. Some cases I've seen upwards of $10,000. These devices are designed to be a twin solution with metallic resonators design. You can combine these, put them on the same feeder, whether at the bottom or at the top of the tower. Next slide. So with Verizon, what we've done is for 850, typically the markets either have 850 LTE being put on their A band or their B band. And there's a lot of information in the slide. What we're showing you is that this is where you're going from 8 CDMA carriers to 4, and you're getting 5 megahertz of LTE. You can do that whether you're on A band or B band, or in some cases, you may actually have A band and B band. And so what you're doing is you're having 10 meg of LTE and 10 meg of CDMA, and we have a new product that will actually combine your 700 with CDMA and LTE. So these are designed to be a temporary solution for Verizon. Essentially, they have to have CDMA on until 2020. But we also know, if you go to the next slide, I'll show you, there's a new application where CDMA is not necessarily needed for an entire 5 meg, and people want to have as much LTE as possible. So what we came out with, and this is a product that's ready to go. It's in PeopleSoft. You can buy it right now. Let's say you have a new dual band radio coming out. You can take your 700 and your 850, so whether you're A band or B band, and you can put both of those through one port. Then on the other port, you can take either CDMA, you can put it on A prime, or you can put it on B prime, and you can put that on the other port. That way, this is designed so that you can keep CDMA on past 2020 if you decide to do that. I've talked to many markets that this is the solution that they want. This product, as I mentioned, we're already building them. We're already stocking them. Talley will be stocking them as well. Next slide, please. So we talked a little bit about macro sites. A lot of our development really has been towards small cell. Small cell is an ambiguous term. It could be small cell, microcell, picocell, femtocell, ODAS. Really what we're talking about for the most part is utility pole applications, nodes, things like that. I'm not going to get into all the products on this page, but just more of as a transitionary page, to kind of show you some of our new product development. Go to the next slide, but I'll kind of talk about that. So one of the, I would say, often overlooked areas on the small cell site, but very important, is the cabinet. So this is a Transtector product. Transtector has been designing cabinets for small cell sites and similar type sites for many years, actually. And this is a product where typically if you are providing power to, let's say, a utility pole, this doesn't have to be a utility pole. We could do 60 amp applications up to 100. We're actually seeing 100, 150 amp applications for the new 28 and 39 gig products, which are still in development. Your local codes have kind of their own interpretation of what they need on the site, except for the fact that every local code calls out that there has to be UL67. So this is a UL67 panel. Now, when I say UL67, there's actually two forms. One is service entrance rated, and the other is not. So our products are service entrance rated. And why does that matter? It matters because if they're not, you actually have to have a disconnect put in ahead of the panel. Ours, you do not. You have a main breaker. You can have with or without disconnect. What we've tried to do is typically a contractor or somebody else will say, okay, I need to put power on the site. And they'll go to a Home Depot, they'll buy a box. The box will have standard breakers. They'll have maybe 15, 20, or 30 amp breakers. And for the most part, they only need 3 amps or 7 amps or what have you. And those boxes too, they're pretty big. They're pretty cumbersome. These are actually 8-inch boxes. They're about the same size as a pole. They come with configurable breakers, so you can tell us what you want. They're UL67 rated, and they have very high-end surge protection, 50 kA surge protection built in. So this will actually provide surge protection to your site. So we've seen a lot of areas where people are red tagging sites because they're not safe. There's a violation of a UL67 code. This is something that Transtector is an expert in. We're happy to help with all of your sites, and we're actually working with some of the major carriers right now on helping them to make sure they have safe sites.
Hey Kevin, does this have an ability to lock the box too? Is it just standard like padlock or something on there?
Yeah, if you look at the very bottom of the picture, there's actually an area you can lock it. Right where it's pointing to flexible mounting brackets can accommodate screws. There is an area you can lock it if you decide to. And also we have a version of this box too that has a disconnect built in. So that's just another, typically you have a meter and then a disconnect and then a breaker panel. This is kind of an all-in-one solution. And even then, we even have one smaller than this. If you only need 3 sectors, we can do it within about 5 inches wide, and all the way up to 12 inches wide, depending if it's a node for like a macro cell on a rooftop or something like that.
All right, very good.
And I believe this is actually the final slide. So, with the development and implementation of 4310 connectors, we're seeing in both DC block and DC pass applications the need for surge protection. So this is a very minor slide. It's very there's not a lot of information. However, just so you know, these products are, when I say PIM rated, they're excellent PIM ratings. We're looking at a -173 DBC, which we were talking about 150s just a few years ago. So these are 4310 connectors. They're designed to be 40 kA rating DC block applications. And one thing to know too is Polyphaser is a really well-known brand, but it's a really well-known brand because it's very reliable. Polyphaser product, this type it's an LC filter design. What that means is it's a mechanical design. It has capacitance. It has it's always on because it's mechanical. It can take lightning strikes or at least surge strikes and it'll stay on and stay active. It also has a let-through voltage that's 120 times better than our competitors. I'd be happy to share a white paper on that if that's of interest, but this product is ready to go. You can buy it from Talley right now. And
Kevin, these look like that they both have a flange that could be attached to it too if you want to do bulkhead flange and do some kind
Absolutely.
of a hoteling type of scenario.
That's correct.
Okay, very good.
Bulkhead mount, yes. Oh, yeah, sorry, one more slide, I lied. So on the test and measurement front, as I mentioned, 4310 connectors, that's kind of driven some new product development for us. Anyone who's familiar with our IPA series or IVA series, essentially your IPA is your PIM analyzer. Your IVA is that's your cable and antenna loss. So for example, distance to fault, spectrum monitoring, or you have return loss or cable loss. We've implemented some changes. So on the IPA front, especially for T-Mobile, there's a lot of 600 meg spectrum is out there now, and there are radios developed and being placed out there, and there's a need for PIM measuring. So we have a new IPA for 600 coming out in September, and when I say coming out, it'll be ready to ship. It's actually coming out in about a month. And then the IVA, which is your spectrum monitoring, cable loss, return loss. Previously, we had gone down to 560. That's available now, so it includes your 600 meg. So it's basically 560 or 555 through 2700. We are now developing it to go all the way up to 6 gig. So your CBRS, your Citizens Band, and your LAA, your 5 gig are going to be covered. And then in applications like rail or UHF, VHF, things like that, we're also going all the way down to DC. So it'll, we had a kind of a sweet spot we developed it for, which is the wireless world, where you basically had all of your frequencies covered from 600 through through WCS or 2.5. Now we're expanding that to make sure that everything's covered. And then the other thing is, if you look at the pictures on the right, this is a portable device. When I say portable, we use a Class 1 Bluetooth. The Class 1 Bluetooth, we rate it up to 200 feet. We've seen up to 350 feet. And because this thing only weighs 2.5 pounds, you can literally do some of your site testing if the carrier allows. And we've done it. You can put like a little Yagi antenna on the end of it and fly it up and do some of your interference hunting with a drone. So it's really cool. We're also working on some other stuff, but it's not something I can really sell yet because it's still in development. But we're going to have some new implementation where we can actually, especially on the PIM side, we can let the customer calibrate the equipment themselves instead of having to wait for us to do that. So that is probably about a month away, and some other exciting things that I'll hopefully be able to talk about the next time. So I believe that's it. I appreciate everyone's time, and if anyone has any questions, I kind of ran through that pretty quickly. My apologies, but I want to make sure that I didn't take up too much of your time.
That's all. It looks good. We don't have any questions right now. Let's give it a minute. I'm going to go ahead and unmute everybody unless you're a gross offender of a bunch of noise. But let me go ahead and open the microphones up. All right. So thank you, Kevin, for all of the information as it relates to Kalelus, as it relates to 4310 connectors and the conditioning, as well as the information as it relates to test equipment as moving forward. Small cells and just smaller form factor and aesthetics are becoming a high priority, so that's always going to be good information. The microphones are open. Does anybody have any additional questions related to the presentation? And if you need to be slide specific, I can get to whatever slide you need to as well. So go ahead, the mics are open. Quiet audience for us, Kevin.
So real quick, allow me to explain the silence earlier. My 3-year-old got downstairs, so I had to turn off my mic for a second. Sorry about that.
That's all right. Kenny, your mic is on as well too. Kenny from Talley. I'm just wondering, did you have any additional questions that you can think of off the top of your head, sir, that we may have missed or covered too quickly?
No, I think it was very productive. I don't think I have any questions on my end. I appreciate the time, Kevin. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah,
right.
and for any of these products too, happy to send out specs to the Talley team. We have them ready to go. Just to mention, Kalelus has about 150 products approved at Verizon and AT&T both. So we're highly sought after company for those. We're the #2 provider overall for filters at both of those companies, and we're growing. And so we're happy to help with your needs. Our quality is excellent. I think we have a 1 in 1,000 return rate on a Kalelus product. So, we're hoping that once we help you out once, we can continue to do so.
Right on. Thanks very much, Kevin. We're going to bid the audience adieu. Thank you very much for your time. If you have any questions or information requests that you'd like, reach out to your respective Talley sales rep. If you don't have one, call our 800 number at 949-7079. And if I can't get the information, I'll find the information and I'll call Kevin and we'll go ahead and give you a call together. But thanks again for everybody and all of your time. Have a great day.
Thank you.